The temperature is nice and warm in the Boiling Point Podcast studio, so come on in, get cozy, and let's enjoy the conversation. We empower leaders through thoughtful discussions to positively impact our world. Our host, Dave Carroll, founder and CEO of Vision Coaching Inc., is highlighting how we can thrive in business communities. Our conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and inspirational storytellers are shining a spotlight on empowerment. Joining Dave this week is our special guest host, Emily Roger. Let's join the conversation with Dave and Emily.
I'm back with a new co-host who was in our last episode was our guest. She's been a guest before, Emily Roger, not Rogers, who's got this brilliant story. If you have not listened to her story, I really encourage you to listen to the podcast we did where David Savoie, other co-guest host, and I interviewed you, Emily. I'm looking across at you right now because we are actually across from each other. We're in the same room, properly socially distanced. We're going to bring our guest in a second. So how are you feeling about being a co-host?
I'm excited about this because I absolutely love Dave's album, and I'll try and give you space and not take over the whole show, but I have so many things that I want to talk to him about.
Yeah. I know. Well, it's okay. So let's bring him in then. Dave Carroll, welcome back. You've been with us before.
I have, and it's great to be back on the show. Thanks for having me.
And so Dave's got this. For anyone that doesn't know him, we'll let him share the kind of the backstory. I mean, there's a whole bunch of backstories, but I mean, probably how you're best known, Dave, in a moment. But another way you're known to me is some of the work you're doing. And you and I were the two Daves in with the group that's known as the Wallace McCain. I don't know what it stands for. SEP. What does that stand for? Executive.
Yeah, Yeah, it used to be called 2IC, which was second in command or whatever, but it's a kinder, gentler version.
Yes, exactly. So it's a peer group. They get together. There's a number of them, and they're self-moderating. And then, unbeknownst to both of us, they invited us to be in different parts of their day. And all I can tell you, Emily, is I thought, oh man, I got to go ahead of Dave. That's probably better than going after him because let's put a little pressure on me. So I don't know if you want to talk about that work later as well. But why don't you introduce yourself to Emily and to the guests, to the listeners. Who's Dave?
Well, I'm a singer-songwriter, but I consider myself a storyteller more than anything else. And I've been doing that for over 30 years. The first 20 years of my career was with my brother Don in a band called Sons of Maxwell. And we played many times in St. John and O'Leary's over the year with Brent Mason and that ilk. And we traveled all over the world doing that for a while. And then when an airline broke my guitar in 2008, I wrote a song about it when social media was just becoming this thing. And United Breaks Guitars is the song that I wrote, and it went viral at a time when it was a new and exciting thing, and it opened up all these other doors that allowed me to become a speaker and an author. And I've traveled to, I think it's 34 countries now, telling my story about customer service and branding and social media and the importance of storytelling to whoever will listen to it. And it's been probably I called my company that I started after that happened Big Break Enterprises, because it was probably the biggest break anyone could have in a career like mine.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So like that isn't, have you heard of this story?
I have.
The story, right?
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. And because Emily's got a similar story that she just shared with us about, putting something out there that's gone viral, maybe in a different way. What do you think resonated about that particular story about having a broken guitar, Dave?
Well, I've had over 10 years to talk to people and think about it. And I think at the beginning, it had to do with the fact that everyone had a bad airline experience. So people have had things that gotten broken, and it's the feeling that goes along with it, that feeling of I wasn't respected. I entrusted my stuff to somebody else and someone didn't respect it. And that's universal. And so it ended up becoming a water cooler conversation starter for people around the world. It wasn't so much about me and this story that people were talking about. It was the entryway to share a story of their own. And it was the early days for social media monitoring and social media for that matter. So it was kind of groundbreaking at the time in that sense too.
Well, like, and for, like, what was the, like, how many, just all these people are curious about, like, how many views or hits or whatever the metric is, like, what kind of, when we said it went viral, like, what was the response like?
Well, today it's at about 21 million, which is a big number, but there are videos with much bigger numbers now. But my goal was to get 1 million views with all 3 videos I promised, because I promised United a trilogy of songs. And I thought I might need a year to get 1 million, and with all 3 combined, but I ended up getting 1 million in 4 days. And so that became 1 million was a big number in a short number of days at the time. So it became a news story for that, which fueled the count as well. And it probably got to, I think, 7 or 8 million by the second week. And then it sort of slowed down and just has been going up for the last 10 years. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Oh man, it's awesome. So Emily, over to you.
Can you tell me a little bit about compassionate design actually, and how that all ties into where that kind of came into play with this?
Yeah. So I've always been trying to write songs, I think, from the heart to the heart of other people. And so there's been a certain amount of that as the storyteller side. I prefer moving people with my music in a positive way and make them feel something. So United Breaks Guitars happened, and I started speaking. And initially, in the first couple of years, for sure, I didn't really understand why it was popular or what it meant. I would finish my talks saying that the big lesson was that we're all connected. And I believe that through music. I'd known it for a long time. And that seemed to be enough. But then I started thinking, if we are all fundamentally connected with one another, then maybe we have a fundamental obligation to do something about that too. And so maybe there was something more to look at. And it occurred to me that in all the businesses I was talking to, and in music and in life and all of our interactions, compassion's missing a lot. And it's free and it's contagious. Compassion is free and contagious. And it's basically a very simple idea that compassion is the deep awareness of the suffering of another and the willingness to alleviate it. So it's only got really two components, and they're easy to follow. You have to be able to see a problem, and you have to be motivated or empower other people to make that problem go away. And so that has applications in your personal life, and it has applications in any business's life, because businesses are looking for ways to improve themselves without costing them anything, and that's kind of free. And so I developed a program called Compassionate Design, which it's just simple ideas that punch above their weight if they're executed. And Compassionate Design has sort of 3 tenets to it. And the first is to love and respect yourself and appreciate what you bring to the party in any situation because we all have a story to tell. We all have skills. And I believe that the thing that holds most people back in the world is some sort of undervaluing of what you bring to the world. And if you really knew who you were and what you were capable of, you would love and respect yourself more, and you would achieve great things. So that's the first one. The second one is, with everybody that you meet, also appreciate that they have a unique story and they have a superpower that you might not have, and get curious about that. So appreciating other people is the second one. And the third one is to understand that, going back to where I was at the beginning, that we all have more in common that we don't. And so if you believe that, then you should be able to look at everybody you meet and find some aspect of yourself in them. And if you love and respect yourself, first of all, then you will be able to find that part of yourself in somebody else and find something to love and respect in another person. And that, to me, seems like a great recipe to start any relationship. And to me, compassionate design is applicable as a songwriter in front of an audience to learn about who they are and share some stories that resonate with them. But it's also for the world's biggest companies to try and respect and understand and appreciate the employees they have. So it's powerful sauce that it brings with it.
Amen.
Yeah, I love that. And Dave, I will say, I'm very selective in what I listen to and what type of music I listen to, because like lyrics are so powerful and what we say is so powerful and what we listen to. And every one of your songs on your new album, I'm just like, yes, 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 yes. I love them so much. And, you speaking about, Contagious is your first song on your album. It's like, if that is not contagious to get somebody like up and dancing, or at least like tapping your toe and wanting to sing along. Like,
high praise.
Yeah.
That song, the song's called "Are You Ready?" That was just a last minute addition. It was written and recorded 2 weeks before it went to the manufacturer and had it all mastered, because I had listened. I'd had some of these songs were around for 7 years, and the album overall seemed to be lacking just a little bit of energy. Maybe I could put something out that would kickstart the record, give it a sort of a adrenaline shot, and make up for some of the softer songs and just balance it out a little bit. And that was written in an afternoon and recorded a demo the next day, final session the next week, and there we were. And it's awesome when that happens sometimes.
Is that like, I'm not, I enjoy music. I'm not musical myself. And I'm so interested in that, the whole process of songwriting. But when I hear that, like this last minute addition, is that something that happens very often?
Not to me. I tend to take a longer time. And after I did it, and after I heard, that's one of my favorite songs on the record too. And it's like, why didn't I do that more often? That would be nice if you could just decide, like, that happened, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a higher energy song that will be the standout in some ways among the whole collection. And I think it boils down to, I think, being more intentional and just I'm deadline driven and that sort of thing.
I was just thinking we should probably do you want to introduce the album and tell when it's been released and where to get it, that sort of thing, Dave?
Yeah, sure. The CD is called Until One Day, and it's my third solo release. It's got 11 original songs on it. You can buy it on my website. My mother will mail it to you. She still does all of our mail order. And if you want the physical, if you want to buy the digital from my site, you can do that, but you can also purchase it on iTunes and stream it on iTunes and Spotify and even YouTube, I believe. So it seems to be available everywhere.
What's your website, Dave?
DaveCarrollMusic.com.
Perfect.
You have to say the music part. There's a guy, there's many Dave Carrolls, and all myself and all the other Dave Carrolls are looking to eliminate the UK Dave Carroll who's got DaveCarroll.com. But until then, you got to say DaveCarrollMusic.com.
Well, can you imagine being one of the other Dave Carrolls, not this Dave Carroll, like with all your, the internet sensation you've been, like everyone's probably just like can't even get noticed out there in Google and sort of and all that sort of thing. You had another question. And I gotta say, Dave, Emily she's prepared.
I love your music, and I'm so excited about your book. It's like everything that you are doing are all things that I just love. And I could have like 6 hours sitting here talking to you. And your album, like your last song. So you saying how starting off your album with that upbeat song, and that I think ends out is "Let Your Heart Shine Bright." Is that the last song on it?
Yeah.
That the kid song, "This Little Light of Mine." Are you familiar with that song? I'm like, this is an adult version now of that song in some way. It's so beautiful, and just the message that is that's behind it. I'm curious, the song "The Giant."
Yep.
What's that about?
So that's probably one of my favorites or most meaningful songs on the record. And I've got 2 boys. Actually, my son Flynn is on the cover. I took that picture, and that's my son Flynn and our dog. And he's a typical boy, I think. And I wrote that song probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I wrote it with him in mind, because as a dad, you want your kids to thrive and be happy all the time. And of course they're not. And I heard him saying some negative self-talk, just typical stuff, nothing groundbreaking. But it occurred to me, like, I started being a dad a little later. I was 40 when he was born. And so I thought at the time, the biggest gift a parent could give their kid would be to make sure they knew they were unconditionally loved by at least 2 people, their mom and dad. And but then I'm aware that I started late, and if it goes as planned, as I hope it does, there will be a section of his life where I'm not around, and I would hate if the only people he knew loved him were not there. And so I figured the next evolution of the thinking is the best gift you can give your child is to help them love themselves. And if you can help them do that, then they're set for life, because no matter where they go, they've got somebody that loves them. And so the song The Giant is about growth, I think, and how people who finally get fully actualized through life, maybe they start recognizing that they have a giant in them, and then they grow up and they know the giant in them, and then ultimately at fully realized, they recognize they are the giant, and they always have been the giant. And so Marianne Williamson wrote a great poem about that, like if you knew who you really were, that sort of thing. And that may have had an influence on the song, but the message is the same. And the whole way the song came out, and we have a string quartet playing on it, real musicians playing stringed instruments, and it was arranged by a professional and that sort of thing. The song, I think, it impacted me when I first heard it, and I wrote it, and I was there the whole time, and I'm hearing from other people that it had a strong impact on them as well.
What was the impact on you, Emily?
Yeah, it you were speaking earlier when I was asking about compassionate design, about how we don't really realize the impact that we are capable of having sometimes. And that was the message that I got from it, from listening to that. But yeah, and I think it's something that you can listen to it over and over again, depending on what kind of headspace you're in that day, and possibly get a different message or a different kind of self-interpretation of it. But it was one of those ones that it stirred up some sort of emotion in me that I was like, oh yeah, this is powerful.
Yeah, I find my favorite songs that I've written are the ones that I had something very specific in mind when I wrote it, but the way that it ends up can take on another meaning or apply in a powerful way to somebody else from a completely different perspective. It's nice when you have a message that is kind of universal and you see it one way, but it has another thing. So for that one, I ended up thinking I was writing it for my son, but after it wasn't until I was finally done and I'm listening to the whole thing, and I realized it was as much for me as it was for him. And if you're religious, maybe people think of it as that's a message from God talking to you, right? It depends on how you receive it. And yeah, it's nice when it works in different ways.
Do you find you talk about being a father a little later in your life? I can relate to that. Our last child was born when I was 45. It was a very beautiful surprise, not very unexpected. And I guess my other kids would be a few years older, but it was late 30s essentially. Is that new sources of inspiration for you, Dave? Being like having children and seeing the struggles that they're up against, and watching that and knowing, you got to let them learn their lessons. Or I'm kind of projecting what I feel is important in parenting, but also wanting to, try not to save them, wanting them to grow, but also wanting them to know you unconditionally love them.
Yeah.
How that impacts, how you're showing up in your business and in your speaking and in your songwriting and all the other mediums.
Yeah, I think I share your vision of all that. It definitely affects what you can do. I'm a big believer in family and that sort of thing. So my days of going on the road for weeks at a time are done. I'm not doing that anymore. So it affects how I roll out my business life. And I do try and be around every evening, shut things off at least between supper time and when they go to bed, and very much our conversations and the interactions, they've influenced me in a ton of different ways. My book, Tom the Tomato Plant, that we'll probably talk about in a bit, that was totally inspired because I was lying down with the boys and riffing stories off the top of my head, which many times, because kids are brutally honest, they'd say, "Dad, that story sucks." But I did this one about this tomato plant named Tom, and they were both sort of into it, and they're like, "Dad, okay, that's a pretty good story." And so that's the reason it's a real thing right now. And yeah. Okay,
I want to get into that. I just want to share, but I love how honest kids are, right? Like they're so like just brutally honest, like and loving and all these things. And I was helping coach my son's hockey team a number of years ago, And I'm only interested in being kind of like an assistant coach. And it's a hard thing coaching kids, a lot of time. And I just, all respect to people to go out there and give their time and volunteer for kids. It's amazing what they do. So this coach was give these fiery speeches, before the game and stuff, and he'd usually like at the last minute say, "What do you got to say, Mr.?" And he would always Mr. Vale or Mr. Whoever, right? And anyways, I was got a little caught off guard the first few times, so then I started getting ready for something and to give my own fiery speech. And my son came up, he goes, "Dad, can you just not say anything in the future?" Like he goes, "You got serious motivation issues, like in terms of motivating others, And I'm like,
Yeah.
Stick
to the pylon drills, Dad.
Like, just go shag pucks kind of thing, right? And I was like, wow. But it was true, because I looked around and all the kids were just kind of like sagging a little bit. So I love that. But the book, what an interesting thing to do. Now let's see.
There it is, Tom the Tomato Plant.
Can you talk, Dave, so while you have that up, so you're in the big screen?
Yeah, so this is called Tom the Tomato Plant, and this is my only version. This is the prototype. The rest are being shipped right now, so I'm hoping to get them sooner than later, but it's in the supply chain God's hands. But so that I wrote the story here. It's a 1,200 word story about compassion and resilience and helping other people out and helping them become their best selves, because you get rewarded in the end by that. And we did talk about the giant. I put, because it aligns so well with the story, I had it charted, and it sits at the back of the story, and there's a QR code that you can grab your phone and go get the song. So this book actually has its own soundtrack, which I think is kind of unique, and awesome. it helps reflect on the different things I do, and hopefully generate some interest in the other things.
Well, and it's so many of your messages that you are teaching through your songs, through your public speaking, and to now be able to tap into these young minds, these young readers, and start planting those tomato seeds in them of what compassion's really about.
Yeah. And the thing I like about, again, I think the story it's written for kids, but there's something in it for people of all ages as well. Just a little reminder, it's not going to teach anybody anything, but it's maybe just point you in the direction of being more compassionate and intentional. And so in my business talks, I talk about the power of story, that storytelling is a superpower, that we have the ability to change people's lives, and with a heartfelt story, and that I can use this as a business parable just to talk. If it's about employees, it could be about giving your employees everything they need to become the very best they can be. And the rewards that come from resilience and all of that stuff too. So I intend to use it in my business talks as a business parable, but it's written with kids in mind.
I think a lot of children's books can be so used so powerfully. Like we were talking about, Emily's going through Real Roads program, and I'm sure they've referenced Dr. Seuss or some, right? The Places You Will Go. Yeah. Was that, which is it's just such an, it's good. It doesn't matter how it's ageless. It's classic. It doesn't apply to any particular time. Would you agree with that?
I would. There's a book that my grade 2 teacher gave me called The Little Engine That Could Better Train. And that book has stuck with me. And a friend of my mom's actually mailed me a version of the book a couple months ago. And it's timeless, like this message of turning what we think into, no, I can do this. I know I can do this. And these messages that really do stick with us. And then being able to have the visual cues that go along with it that are part of the storybook it just adds to it. Are you able to go on tour with your new album? I know I just totally kind of switched things there, but
we're allowed to do that. You're the co-host. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. I am allowed, I think. I've been playing a little bit. I'm right in the process now trying to organize a tour of theaters here in Nova Scotia. And so I'm pushing that out because there's too much uncertainty to put that kind of energy into the next couple of weeks, and they're booked anyway or closed yet still. So it's in March, and I've got three theaters confirmed, and trying to maybe get 6 or 7 shows to really put some energy behind the Until One Day CD.
Who are the, like, in terms of your business talks and that sort of thing, like who are the clients you're trying to attract? Like who's do you feel is most receptive to your message, Dave?
It's been pretty cool, and it sounds like I'm trying to be all things to all people, but I believe everybody can get into the story that I tell. And I'm not the charts and graphs guy, so I'm typically used as an opening speaker or a closing speaker at a multi-day event. Or I think I surprise some people when I come in because they think it's going to be pure entertainment. This is the guy who took down an airline. He got mad at them and he destroyed them. And that's not the way I approach it. I tell the story as it happened, but I hope to leave them with this idea that it's a brand building opportunity, and it's, if we were nicer to each other, we could achieve so much more and that sort of thing. So I think people sometimes get more than what they bargained for, or I hope that's what they get. But the most interesting difference between audiences happened one week where I spoke to the board of directors of Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. So some of the biggest people managing some giant brands are in this room, about 12 people. And then the next day I went to Fredericton to Park Street School, and I spoke to kindergarten kids and the low grades, and I gave the exact same presentation. It was the exact one, and it hit the same way because, and you can do this because if you speak from the heart to the heart, kids have fully developed hearts when they're born, right? But their brains are a little slow. So you can't speak to the brain, but if you speak from the heart to the heart, they're the same, whether you're 5 or 50. And so you can reach people in a meaningful way. And that's where the meaning happens anyway. If you try and give people too many charts and data and graphs, they fall asleep, or they only use it for that one little sliver of information. But if you're giving a lesson, you're making somebody feel better about themselves or changing their ideas about something in a positive way, that can be done to any age, and because it's a feeling. And kids, like you sort of mentioned, they're brutally honest and they get it right away. And yeah, that's why they're a good sounding board too.
Who was more interactive, the Park Street School or the Royal Caribbean?
Yeah, not to take anything away from the board of directors, but they were a lot more reserved than the Park Street's kids.
So, and isn't that interesting though? Like, because they were once kids, and they would have been more responsive in an environment, that you met the other kids in, years ago. But there's something about, the process of, as getting older, and we get more serious or something, like it's this really odd thing that happens, unfortunately, not for everyone, but I find in corporate settings, you see a lot of that. Would you agree with that, Dave? Have you noticed that?
Yep, for sure. And there's careers and certain career paths that are more exciting or more fun than others. I remember when Don and I used to play corporate events, we had another side A/B comparison, and we played the same venue at a convention hall 2 nights in a row, 2 totally separate conventions. One was for nurses and one was for accountants. And we did the exact same show, totally different evening, right? The nurses were fun, they were dancing, and the accountants were sort of sitting there, and they were very reserved. And yeah, it all depends on the night and who's in the room, right?
Yeah, and how much alcohol's flowing,
right?
Too.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and I also wonder too, with the group of the staff from the Royal Caribbean, how many questions that might have been similar to the ones that the Park Street students asked were they wondering about or curious about, but just didn't pipe up and ask for fear of whatever?
That's a really good question, because it's like with computers, right? Kids take to computers, they just assume they don't know what they need to do, but they just jump in and they learn it almost immediately. But at my age, I come in with this belief that I'm not going to get through the first 2 layers of something. I'm not going to understand it, and I get jammed up almost right away. And so for those two gigs, the kids didn't really care about the impact of anything. They just, that's cool. You made a song, you wanted to do a song, and you did a song, and it got really popular, and you're on YouTube and that sort of thing. And the Royal Caribbean guys, they weren't sure if it was relevant. One gentleman in particular, he was in the oil business, and surprised me. He didn't think social media was that important to his business. And I said, "What do you do?" And he says, "I move oil around the world." And I said, like, if another Exxon Valdez happened, everyone in the world would know your name tomorrow, and you have to have a social media strategy to handle that. But he didn't quite get that from the story. And So that was, I think he maybe had some blind spots, right?
As we all do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And covering those on a day-to-day basis.
So this, compassionate design, and I was listening to a podcast, and the guest, I can't even remember who it was now, was saying he thinks there's an empathy gap in the world today, and I think it's a compassionate gap. There's people talking at each other, but not like, and both of you have leveraged. Emily's got a great story, Dave, a really recent story about sharing. Authentically sharing something she was going through, missing her front tooth, that has over close to 2 million views right now, and was stuck up for no other reason than she just I think was being compassionate with herself and said, you know what, this is something I should share. Maybe this will help someone else. She'll express it, and we did determine that if you Google Emily Roger front tooth, right, Genevieve, you can see all what's happened there. But similar to you, but this whole idea of this gap, or are you guys feeling that as well? Like, this seems like there's a lot of conversations that are happening in the world today, and they seem to be so polarized. That they're just like shouting at each other, not talking with each other, not listening to understand. You know what I mean? And I find it really deflating, and it's like it almost like drains my tank a little bit. And I've learned that as recent, it happened today. I got to be careful how much I listen to CBC. It's a great source of news, but it's really, everything is quite negative. And it's just, but going back to this idea of a gap in compassion, are you guys noticing that in the world in terms of how we're communicating, or maybe is it just being reported that way?
Emily, you go first.
I would say that, for me, and I think especially during this pandemic, is having a greater understanding of what the differences are between empathy, sympathy, compassion, and that part of being able to take what it is that we're feeling and then turn it into something, so that we're not just kind of getting stuck in that sympathy. But I think, in my perspective and in my kind of world, that there is a change, that people are becoming more compassionate and more open to hearing other people's. I know there's a very kind of polar opposite side of that, and maybe that's just kind of who I choose to interact with about those things, but there's definitely a lot of turmoil and a lot of pushback in the opposite way as well.
How about you, Dave?
I would agree with you 100%. I don't think the world's ever been this polarized. And I think polarization is the biggest threat facing humanity right now. I don't take it lightly at all. I think it eclipses climate change and everything else, because if people could come together and stay a little closer to the center, and not to give up on the views that you have, but to get close enough to opposite views, be a little bit right or a little bit left, but you can't even hear the right or the left if you're at the extreme. And that makes for dangerous times, because people at the extreme say and do extreme things, and there's no one there to moderate them because they can't hear it. And so the answer, I also agree with what you said, Emily, that there are more people, I think, that are waking up. I think I'm one of them that understands I have the potential to be extreme right or extreme left if I hang out with those people too often. So I've chained myself to the center, knowing that I lean one way slightly more or the other, but I intentionally try to be compassionate, and that means actively do something to change it. And I see the distinction, like you just said as well, the big distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy to me is a good stepping stone towards compassion, but it doesn't obligate people to do anything about it. It just maybe takes the place of understanding. So I won't get mad at you if you say something to offend me, because I'm going to understand you had a bad day or you're going through something. And if it ends there, then that's not compassion, right? I have to maybe reach out and find out how I can help you feel better, so you don't say the things that offend me, and I maybe need to understand I've got my own blind spots or predispositions that I got to get in check too.
Yeah, your line in the song, "When the World Stops Ending," about helping each other without keeping score. That was a real eye opener, and something for myself that I'm constantly kind of checking in on, of like, yeah, how are we just kind of putting ourselves out there, helping one another, and this thing of, so often, especially with corporations or kind of larger, broader scale things, of this thing of, well, what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm. And to what you said, Dave, about kids, right? That sort of line was informed by my kids just in making ice cream cones for them, right? If there's only one ice cream, one kid, I give it to them. Doesn't matter what size, they're grateful. If they're both there, the first one is or the second one's judging the size of the first kid's cone, and then you got to fight in your hands if they're not exactly the same, right? It could be a giant cone, but if another one had a more giant cone, we got a problem on our hands. And so people are spending a lot of time looking over their shoulder rather than
totally. And that's part of human nature, right? That's, and when you run across a person who's not that way, it's pretty. In fact, our middle daughter, Bryn, we often wonder. We got these two redheads, fiery tempers, and very passionate, and Bryn is in her own way, this golden blonde hair, and she's just comes home and she will say, oh, so and so didn't want to talk to me, but this is maybe not now, but when she was younger, she would say, but they probably need to spend time with someone else, and we're just like, where did you like? Who are your real parents? The other two kids are not like this, so she wouldn't care as much about but the other two are quick, are looking very closely at how big the ice cream cone is. Yeah. I was thinking about this idea of, and I know we're kind of towards the end here, and like Emily, I feel the same way. We could go on and go on. We could have like a 3-hour Joe Rogan style podcast, maybe not exactly like him, but in the length, right? Thank you for the distinction, both of you, in terms of empathy and compassion and sympathy as an example. And there's a great article I read once about the failure of empathy, and I think it highlights what you said, Dave. And it really struck me at the time, because I guess maybe I was probably using them interchangeably. And in fact, we came up with a vision statement about a world that is transformed by resilient, compassionate and creative leadership. And it was compassionate was used for what we're describing right here, or discussing right here. So, if someone's on this journey, do you guys have any recommendations in terms of reading or podcasts, or clearly we got some music and a really good book to read, but anything else?
I've been influenced maybe 2006 or 7. I read Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention. That was a great book that talked about, as the title says, about being intentional in what you're doing and how the ripple effects of that lead, which led me to The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I ended up writing a song about that almost got on Oprah back in 2008, and talk about ripple and effect. And that some people say that's probably the best song I've written, in their opinion, and sometimes. And so those are classic books. You can always go back to those ones, and it'll if you spend the time on them and contemplate on what you're reading, it'd probably change your life.
100%. Any for you, Emily?
No, nothing in particular that's coming up. Like when you first mentioned that, it was like, well, it's all in Dave's songs.
Yeah.
I need to clone you. We need to clone Emily and
yes.
Yeah.
For Tom, the tomato plant, do you already have your kids given you the go ahead for any other bright stories that you have, or is this the only one so far that your kids were like, yeah, this might have legs?
There's a picture in there of them growing some vegetables on our deck, which is in the same deck that's in the book. So I put that picture in there, and they both are mortified that I put that picture in, because one is wearing a Minecraft hat. And he's like, Dad, no one's wearing Minecraft hats anymore. And so they're not giving up any ideas now.
Right.
Yeah, you have to contact their lawyer first, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Both those books were really really struck me. It resonated with me, I guess, Dave. And the other one, there's this idea that sometimes a book finds you. And I was in Hong Kong at just traveling through on my way to Thailand at a kind of a a tough stretch in my life, maybe. And I wouldn't be a guy that would just grab any book, but I was walking by and this book, beautiful yellow book with this beautiful face smiling at me, was like staring at me. And I grabbed it, and it was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. And it's beautiful, man. And it really, and the reason I bring it up is helped me understand compassion in a completely different way. And I'm so glad I stopped, right? In my hustle to catch the next flight to wherever I was headed. But it's a really powerful read. So we're at the end. Like we said, we could go on and on. Dave, big thanks for reaching out and just saying, hey, I've got some things I want to share. How do people? I mean, I guess you've mentioned it before, but about where they can find books, and I love that your mom is actually sending CDs and that kind of thing. So there's extra incentive, I would think. In terms of what you're doing in terms of your business, is there any other places people can find you?
I try to get people to go everything to davecarrollmusic.com. And so that's where anything to do with speaking or writing or songwriting for other people or all of those things. It's the one-stop shop for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. We generally like to do some takeaways. We kind of we get away from that kind of, but what are you taking away from the conversation today, Emily?
My takeaway is that the world needs more music like yours. And like I was touching on at the beginning of how it's so important what we feed our souls with, our spirits with, our minds with, and to be conscious of that. And that I appreciate you. I appreciate your music, and I appreciate that you are continuing with doing everything that you are, with now kind of reaching out to younger children and to share that same message with everyone, no matter what age bracket they're in, because there's so many incredible takeaways from that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that thanks for the reminder of the power of story, and that the story can resonate with any audience, right? And like a lot of times we get stuck in this. I've had it actually happen where in a corporate environment, I'll get a request to do a certain workshop at usually coaching skills at a certain level in the organization. And then it's okay. So, and now what are you going to do with the executive group? And it's like, well, the same thing. And, response is often, well, no, they know this stuff. I'm like, and we're talking about, things like listening, right? To understand. And the reality is they might not. So why don't we just, why do we have to change the content for, because if it has a classic or timeless theme, it should resonate with all audiences. So thanks for that reminder. Genevieve, over to you to help people know how to subscribe and to check out more of these podcasts and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So easiest place is to head to our website, boilingpointpodcast.com. You'll find that we're on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. And on this episode, we'll link back to Dave's previous episode with us. So everybody, if they want to learn about the background of the United Break Guitar story and Dave's book, they'll hear about it there. And make sure you subscribe, like, and share everything.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily, for co-hosting.
Thank you.
And many thanks, Dave. And we'll see everyone next, 2 weeks from now on the Boiling Point.
Now go listen to the song, Are You Ready?
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Boiling Point Podcast. Remember to subscribe and rate our podcasts on your favorite listening platform. To find out more, head to our website at boilingpointpodcast.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. To find out more about Dave Vale's work, head over to visioncoachinginc.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to check out our next conversation.